Welcome back to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight you'll drift into the soft mist of medieval Japan, a time of wooden sandals and quiet obedience, of mist-covered rice fields and ancient pine groves, a world where even the breeze bowed to tradition. Close your eyes or let them rest heavy on the edge of darkness. Let your breath slow. Tonight we're not chasing heroes or battles. We're simply stepping into the life of someone ordinary. Someone like you, perhaps, if you had been born in a remote farming village in 14th century Japan. It's not a life of glory. No swords to raise, no poems written in your name. It's a life of routine, of silence, of earth and rain. Let's begin with what it was really like to be a rice farmer in feudal Japan. Imagine yourself waking up, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the slow echoing cry of a rooster somewhere beyond the forest mist. The air is still damp from the night rains, and the woven mat beneath you still carries the cool breath of the earth. You sleep on a thin tatami mat. The floor beneath you is packed dirt. Your home is made of wood, bamboo, and paper screens, shoji that flutter slightly in the breeze. But there's no time to lie there. You rise before the light crests over the hills, because the rice waits for no one. Your legs creak as you stand. You slept in the same linen robe you wore yesterday. There is no such thing as change for comfort. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is a scoop of leftover rice, cold, slightly sour, and maybe a few pickled vegetables stored in a clay jar that smells faintly of vinegar and salt. No meat, no tea, just enough to keep you standing. Outside, the village is hushed. The houses are low, the roofs thatched. The paths between them are narrow, muddy, uneven. You don't talk, not because you don't have anything to say, but because the day is long and speaking wastes breath. You walk barefoot or in straw sandals waraji toward the rice paddies. The sandals are soaked before you've taken 10 steps. The ground is soft from weeks of rainfall, and the paddies themselves are little mirrors of the sky, flooded, reflecting clouds you'll never touch. Your job is to transplant seedlings. You squat in ankle-deep water. Your back bends into a shape it was never meant to hold. Hour after hour, you push young rice shoots into the muck. The mud squishes between your toes. Tiny leeches cling to your calves. The sun rises slowly, but it brings no mercy. By midday, you've lost track of time. The rhythm of your life is the rhythm of planting. Push, pull, breathe. Push, pull, breathe. The overseer walks by in silence, his straw hat wide enough to shade his judgment. He doesn't speak, he only watches. You know what happens if your row is crooked, if your hand slow, if your yield is low this season. The tax collectors will come, and they won't ask how hard the rains were this year. They won't ask if your child is sick, or if the birds ate the northern edge of the field. They'll simply take. Rice is wealth, and yours is not yours. So you keep going. The afternoons bring insects. Dragonflies dart over the paddies. Mosquitoes bite without pause. You don't swat them. Swatting is wasted motion. Your hands belong to the rice. Your thoughts wander to the shrine in the center of the village, to the distant lord whose name you whisper but never say aloud, to the monk who visited last summer and spoke of paradise. But paradise doesn't grow in rows, and it doesn't feed your family. So you work. The sun slips downward. The hills turn the color of rusted bronze. And finally, someone bangs a wooden clapper near the path, signaling the day's end. You stand, slowly. Every muscle protests. You walk home with the others in silence. There is no celebration, only dinner, which tastes exactly like breakfast. The children are quiet. They know not to ask for more. You light a single oil lamp, it flickers in the draught. The shadows stretch across the paper walls, tall and thin like ghosts of your ancestors. Before long, you sleep. Because tomorrow, the rice waits again, and the rhythm of your life never misses a beat. Push, pull, breathe. Ikkyu Sojun and the Quiet Rebellion. As the mist curls gently around the wooden beams of a distant temple, and the bamboo rustles softly like paper in the wind, let us turn now to the story of a monk. A man who was both part of the system and somehow never belonged. His name was Ikkyu. Ikkyu Sojun. He lived in the 15th century, during the twilight of the Ashikaga shogunate, a time of political unease, of ornate temples and rigid rituals, a time when Zen was powerful, and yet losing its breath to bureaucracy. Ikkyu was born into this world, but he did not walk through it quietly. He was born under mysterious circumstances, possibly the illegitimate child of an emperor, or perhaps a minor court noble. No one could quite say, and Ikkyu himself didn't care. What mattered to him was truth, but not the kind written in scrolls, not the kind recited in ceremonies. No, Ikkyu's truth was the kind that could be tasted in bitter tea, heard in the cry of a crow in the rain, and felt in the ache of longing that sits in the chest like a sleeping stone. At 5 years old he was sent to a temple. Not unusual. Boys from noble or complicated backgrounds often were. A place to be shaped, to be silenced. He studied the texts. He bowed where others bowed. He chanted in cadence with the morning drums. But something quietly resisted. As the seasons passed, and the temple corridors grew more familiar than his own thoughts, Ikkyu watched the monks. He noticed their robes always clean, their meals never meager, their sermons hollow like bamboo without the wind. They preached detachment, but hoarded incense and gifts from the wealthy. They taught humility, while living like lords behind temple walls. Ikkyu grew restless. He took to wandering, not as a rebel, but as a seeker. He left the polished temples behind and walked through towns that smelled of fish and smoke. He sat with beggars under bridges. He drank sake in roadside inns. He watched the moon ripple in rice paddies after rain. And he wrote poetry, short, sharp, startling, not the flowery court-approved verses. His words struck quietly, like a monk ringing the temple bell once and then disappearing into the trees. One of his poems reads, "Many paths lead from the foot of the mountain, but at the peak, we all gaze at the same moon." Another, 10 days in the monastery breaking silence with farts. Enlightenment smells like pickled radish. He was irreverent, but never empty. He used humor to reveal hypocrisy, earthiness to express transcendence. People began to listen. Not everyone liked what they heard. He was denied high rank, refused abbacy, but Ikkyu didn't mind. He wore black robes instead of ceremonial gray. He walked with the people instead of meditating behind walls. He taught students under trees, served tea with calloused hands, and meditated on the sound of frogs landing in muddy ponds. He said that Zen was not found in silence alone, but in embracing the absurdity of life. He grew old with the same raggedness he had as a young man. He drank, he laughed, he mourned. When asked if he feared death, he replied, "I came from emptiness. I return to emptiness. What's there to be afraid of?" Ikkyu faded with the season, quietly, perhaps under a tree or by the edge of a misty stream. His grave, if it exists, is humble, but his words remain. They drift like wind bells in forgotten gardens. They echo in temples where his name is no longer spoken aloud, but his truth lingers, just beneath the surface. He was a monk, a poet, a mirror, not one to be worshipped, but one to be heard in the quiet between breaths. Silence, honor, and the quiet weight of the blade. As the clouds stretch across the darkening sky and the temple bell hums once in the distance, we drift now into the quieter spaces of medieval Japan, into places not often discussed aloud. Tonight, we explore a ritual shrouded in silence, in stillness, in the kind of reverence that does not ask for understanding. You may know the word seppuku, or its more Western term, harakiri, but this is not a tale of blood. It is a story of belief, of duty so deep that a man could carve it into himself without words. Seppuku was not just death, it was a ceremony, a final act of meaning in a world built on layers of duty. And for the samurai, those quiet warriors of war and poetry, honor was not something worn. It was carried like a blade tucked under the robe, always close, rarely drawn. The ritual of seppuku began with silence. There was no announcement, no dramatic flair. The choice, once made, was a quiet one. Imagine you are a samurai who has failed. Perhaps your lord has died, or worse, you have disappointed him. There is no trial. There is no shouting. There is only a room. Tatami mats laid out carefully, a low table, a single candle, and two men your witnesses. You dress in white, the color of purity, but also the color of funerals in Japan. You kneel. Your swords, katana and wakizashi, are placed beside you, but only the shorter blade is used. There is a bowl of water to rinse the blade. Fresh incense smolders gently nearby. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and iron. Before you begin, you write a poem, a jisei no ku, a death verse, 5 short lines, not to impress, not to justify, simply to accept. It may go something like, autumn leaves scatter, no regret as winds carry what must be carried. Even the moon does not mourn, the pond it no longer reflects. Then, you open your robe, and in one slow, practiced movement, you draw the blade across your abdomen, left to right, not fast, not shallow. It is not meant to be survivable, but not meant to cause a scene either. And as the pain begins its slow bloom, your second, a trusted swordsman kneeling just behind you, raises his sword quietly and brings it down to end the moment with mercy. This was kaishaku, the final gesture, a clean end to a difficult duty. But even this had layers. The second must be precise. Too early, and you dishonor the ritual. Too late, and the pain is allowed to linger. It was not performance. It was not drama. It was obligation woven into the fabric of warrior life. Seppuku was not always punishment. It was often a privilege, a final chance to choose death over disgrace, to speak with the body when words had no use, and it was not spoken of openly. To describe it in detail was to cheapen it. So among samurai, it remained almost sacred, not out of fear, but out of respect. There were even women, samurai wives, who learned a version of the ritual. Jigai it was called. Less violent, but no less solemn. They too would prepare, tie their knees together with silk cord, so they would fall in grace, and open the veins of the neck with a blade passed down like a secret. Even this was quiet. There were no cries, no screams, only the rustle of robes, the flicker of a candle, and the distant sound of wind through pine. Why didn't they speak of it? Because in that world, the loudest acts were done in silence. Seppuku was not death for death's sake. It was the closing of a story in the only language that mattered to those who lived by the blade. And so tonight, as you lie beneath your blankets and listen to the hum of your breath, know that somewhere, centuries ago, a warrior once knelt and accepted the end with such stillness that even time could not forget it. Quiet power, painted screens, and the ritual of stillness. As dawn breaks again over misty mountains and the echo of temple bells fades into the forest mist, we leave the muddy fields, the cold sandals, and the weight of silence worn by the farmer and the monk. Now, we enter through the lacquered gates of a world untouched by calloused hands. The fortress of the daimyo, a lord of land, a commander of warriors, a figure not merely of power, but of presence. But this is not a battlefield. It is a stage of stillness. The daimyo's home. His shiro rises above the trees, built not for comfort, but for control. Its outer walls are tall, thick, layered with pale plaster and dark wood, designed to repel fire, wind, and man. Inside, the rhythm of life slows. Stone gives way to tatami mats. Dark corridors lead to rooms wrapped in paper screens. Fusuma, painted with soft gold cranes in flight, or pine trees that seem to sway without moving. Servants shuffle through the halls, their steps practiced, their heads low. They speak in soft tones, if at all. A daimyo does not raise his voice, nor does anyone else in his presence. You are led, barefoot, through a silent courtyard. There is a garden here, but not like any you've known. No flowers, no clutter, just carefully placed stones, a raked sea of gravel, and a single pond where koi drift like thoughts. This is the art of shitsurai, intentional arrangement. Everything has its place, and everything speaks without sound. In the audience chamber, the daimyo sits on a raised platform. His robes are made of fine silk, dark, subtle, elegant. Not flamboyant, but unmistakably expensive. Behind him a screen painted with chrysanthemums. Before him a space empty. To approach is to bow low and wait for the faintest nod. Tea is served. Not quickly, not casually. A young woman in layered robes kneels, prepares matcha with slow circular strokes. The bowl is turned, not for function but for harmony. This is not refreshment. This is chanuyu, the tea ceremony, a performance of humility, discipline, and restraint. Even the elite practice stillness. The daimyo's meals are modest, but every dish tells a story. A slice of daikon pickled last autumn, a broth brewed from kelp and dried fish, rice so polished it reflects candlelight. He eats in silence, perhaps while a flute plays faintly in the next room, or while a shamisen hums through the sliding doors. At night there may be a tsukimi gathering, moon viewing. Servants unroll bamboo blinds. The courtyard is lit with paper lanterns. Guests kneel in rows composing short poems waka to the pale round moon. Each word chosen like a stone in a garden path. And across from them the daimyo listens. He speaks only when needed, and when he does his voice is soft, deliberate, final. Even pleasure here is ordered. A performance by geisha in silken kimono may follow. Not dancers, not concubines, but women trained in etiquette, art, and quiet conversation. They pour sake with grace. They play games of subtle wit. They offer laughter that never rises above the sound of rain on tile. This is how power rests, not in shouts, but in gazes, not in weapons but in pauses. To live in a daimyo's house is not to indulge freely. It is to move with awareness, to speak with precision, to sit perfectly still while the world bows around you. And yet just beyond the walls of this great compound are the same rice fields, the same farmers, the same roads of mud, the same quiet ache of survival. The distance between them is not measured in miles, but in layers of silence, so thick they become tradition. And now, as we return from the pine forests, the incense-filled temples, and the moonlit chambers of ancient Japan, let your breath settle once more. Let your body soften into the fabric beneath you. You have walked through the flooded fields of rice laborers, followed a monk who spoke truths through silence, witnessed the weight of ritual, and glimpsed the quiet opulence of the elite. The rhythm of their lives, different from yours, yet echoing in the same patterns. Work, stillness, belief, control, and now you may let it go. Let the rice fields fade. Let the temple bells grow distant. Let the silk sleeves fall gently into memory. You are here now, resting, breathing, safe. The past has passed, and sleep may finally arrive like the hush after snowfall, on a pine-covered hill in a village you'll never need to return to again. Good night.